Hello. I think we are here. We'll see. I think there's going to be a little bit of a delay, but good afternoon, Lutheran Communicators. We are here live. I'm with Phil Grimpo from Inspirmedia Productions, and we are talking about broadcasting and live streaming and all that good stuff. So before we start, I'm sitting in St. Louis, Missouri. I know Phil is in Lincoln, Nebraska. So let us know in the comments right now, kind of like where you're watching from today, so we can kind of say hello and just see where everyone's at today. And if you want to, you can go ahead and tag your church and just let us know who you're connected to, so we can follow up later and just stay connected and start building relationships here. So thank you for being here. I know it's a really busy time and we're all trying to figure out all this digital stuff that's happening. Life has changed dramatically in the past 2 weeks, and we're trying to keep up right now. And so thankfully, Phil is here, and he's going to be talking to us a little bit about live stream and broadcasting and anything tech related that we can tackle today. So if you have a specific question for Phil, let us know. Let us know in the comments, and we'll be addressing those as we go. But Phil, thank you for being here, and share a little bit about yourself.
Phil Grimpo. Actually, I've known Seth for a long time. We grew up in a small village of Reese, Michigan. And I came down to Nebraska in 98 to be the media director at a church that was doing nothing with video, nothing with audio, nothing with lighting, and was their media director. And in 2000 started Inspirmedia to kind of serve the greater church. Had a lot of friends who are now youth directors and stuff, and asking for web development and video production. That's what we primarily did. And then in 2004, the church I'm at started a much more media intense service, lighting, sound, video cameras, all that stuff. And we really ramped that up in 2009, which is when Inspirmedia got involved more in live event production. And we've been doing that ever since. In the Synod, we work with a lot of youth gatherings, in the National Youth Gathering, and we work with a lot of churches on technology needs and installations and stuff like that. So this week has been interesting because we're celebrating our 20th year, and I'm pulling out cameras that we haven't used in 20 years and saying, they're still HD, let's get them somewhere. And all that inventory I probably could have gotten rid of a long time ago is all coming in really handy right now.
That's awesome. Yeah. It looks like I'm trying to judge by what's happening on Facebook here. It may or may not have gone through. So I don't know if we're dealing with a...
I saw that. I don't know.
I don't know either. Talking about going live here. So it should have. So let's see. Your live studio should start soon. Thanks for your patience. Well, come on, StreamYard. All right. So just a second, let me see what we got going on here. Broadcast is already live. Yep, great. We could be dealing with a thing here. Let's see. Yeah. Why didn't it go live? Why don't we try another one?
All right.
I don't know. It's just not. It's not loading up. So
yeah, it says live on this corner. It's just not saying it on the website.
It hasn't connected with Facebook yet. That's funny.
Yep.
Nice. All right. Let's see.
Oh, there it is. I see us now. We're live.
Ah, that's funny. Skip over the last 2 minutes, everybody.
All right.
Hilarious. So StreamYard is actually really frustrating because it has a 3-minute lag time. No worries.
So we started when what I saw was when you did this. Like, let's start again. So
very good. That's awesome. Okay. Yeah. So for everybody that's joining us right now, we are live. Finally, we have been having our share of technical difficulties. So I think that's part of what we're all going through right now. Right now, we're using a program called StreamYard. You may even see it in the little corner right here. First time, and working out the issues, enjoying it on the backside. Phil and I have already had 10 minutes of great conversation that you may not have
I think we resolved everything that people could ever need to know.
Yep. So we'll try to find the recording and post it for you guys. It's pretty excellent. Anyway, my name is Seth Hinz. I live and work in St. Louis, Missouri, West County to be more specific. We are in the Midwest. Phil Grimpo is with me today, and he works for a company called Inspirmedia Productions, which is involved throughout the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, working with conventions, conferences, gatherings, what you name it. They've been involved with it. And so he's also working for a church on Sundays and helping them run their services there. So who better than Phil to kind of talk to us a little bit about what he's learned throughout his experiences across, I don't know, you've been doing broadcasts for a little bit now.
Yeah.
Yeah, just thankful you're here. So if you're just joining us, let us know where you're watching from. Again, I'm in St. Louis. Phil's in Lincoln, Nebraska. So we've got the Midwest covered. Drop in the comments where you're watching from and let us know. And any questions you have, tech related or best practice wise for live streaming, let us know. Drop those in the comments as well, and we'll be addressing those as we go. But Phil, if you don't mind, just kind of kicking us off, tell us what life has been like for you the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, so it's interesting in live event business. March 12th was the day that everything disappeared from our calendars. So we said, okay, and we actually Aaron Engelman wrote on a cup like March 12th D-Day for us, and like we went from April being, I don't know how we're gonna survive getting through April to everything went empty. I made sure to take a picture of our work calendar before and after that I'll post at some point. But what immediately happened is that we saw the churches saying, how do we stream? We know we're going to have to do that. So we kind of started going back to our roots, which was video production. And I was saying earlier that cameras, old Canon XLH1s that, people have been telling me, why do I even have them? Why haven't I sold them? Now I think I've got one down in Texas being used at a church to broadcast. So everything came back around to video, and some churches were ready to go and other churches just got thrown into this and had never streamed before in their lives. Now we've kind of got 2 weeks under our belt. In one way, I think for the most part, people have probably landed on what service are we going to use to stream. And now I think we're looking at how do we refine it? How do we make it better? How do we think about this for the long term? One thing that I found interesting, and even with my home congregation, is all of a sudden we looked at the numbers and it's like, wow, we had 4,000 people streaming last week. We need to be doing this full time. And maybe we do need to be streaming. We probably do. But the numbers are weird because who knows what's real and what's not, but also everybody is watching online. I said, once we get back in our churches, that may drop down to 100. So don't say, well, we have all these, you could be a small church that normally has 100 people in church, and all of a sudden you have 300, 500 people, and you say, well, we need to ramp up streaming. We have to be doing this. And you go invest a bunch of money. And then when church opens back up, now you have 5 people streaming. So just a word of caution that if you weren't planning on this, we may need to, we want to be prepared for the future. My guess is that the church is going to be in this situation again. But let's think a little bit strategically about it before we jump in with both feet. That being said, I think what we'd like to talk about and get people's questions is how do we make the production quality good? People are used to watching very polished television. They're used to sitting in church and seeing how we do church, and they're used to watching television, and those two things are very different. So how do we merge those together in a way that people are also feeling comfortable? I know there's one church I talked to and they said, we're a little bit worried. We kind of have to step up our streaming game because all of a sudden people are church shopping because they're looking at different streams. Facebook is putting, hey, the church down the road, the mega church that has all this high-end broadcast stuff, they were ready to go, and it's entertaining and whatever. I see how they're reaching out. Maybe I'm going to join that church. So they were kind of worried about their streaming game. But on the other side, some of the streams I've enjoyed the most have been not the highly produced, but very intimate. A pastor talking to his congregation, 2 people having a Bible study that we get to watch. So I think there's incredible value on that. And then the question is, how do we just make that a little better? How do we make it sound good? Sound is the most important thing. I can have all the lights in the world, but if I can't hear the word, it kind of falls flat. So maybe today what we talk about is how do we add some production quality to these, just to make sure we're communicating the best way possible, regardless of what our setting is.
Absolutely. I think that's right on, Phil. Because I think the tech is going to be very varied across the spectrum. We're going to be across the spectrum here, budgets and cameras that we have access to and all that sort of thing. So very first, I want to be like on it with these questions that are coming in. This person wants to know, what is that earpiece that you have, Phil, as we're talking tech?
This is a Jabra Elite 65T, I think. I actually have one that's not in my ear. Just Bluetooth earbuds. I had my Apple Pros here, but I just think they look stupid in your ears. So I have no problem using them at home, but this is just a little bit better. And then so what my setup here is, just so you know, is we have a studio we set up for people with an LED wall in the back. So that's, Seth had to put a door in the back of his background. That wasn't always there. Yeah, just add depth. But so I do have a camera here, and that's going to a switcher, and the switcher is then going USB to my computer. And in the computer, I pick, do I want my camera on the front of the computer, or do I want to see the switcher? For audio, do I want to see the audio coming off the switcher, or do I want my earbuds, or do I want the mic that's on my computer? So, probably 30 minutes before this happened, we were talking like, hey, could we set up our studio cameras and do that? Yeah, let's try it. So that's kind of our workflow here. And then I put the microphone here because all true like vloggers, broadcasters have a funky looking microphone. So yes, yeah, you've got yours there too.
Yep.
So that's our setup. And I just thought maybe the earbud would help a little bit with some audio cancellation if I use that.
Sure. Yep. I'm on both, so it's good to have something that gets clear audio.
Yep.
So let's start from the start. There are several things you need to consider when you're talking about a broadcast. I'll just rattle some off, Phil, and then you can kind of pick where you think the priority should be, regardless of budget or whatever's happening. So you've got lighting, you've got audio, you've got camera quality, you've got stream speed. I'll just start with those, and kind of where should somebody start? If I'm going to prioritize one of those things, where should they start?
Yeah. Audio, I think is I don't know about the priority. That would be tough. I think you have to have a baseline for everything. For lighting, if you have some lighting, that's great. But making smart decisions of, I don't have a big window behind me. People say, hey, I want to put that stained glass behind me because that looks super cool, or that beautiful window of our courtyard. That's awesome, except now that's backlight. Unless you have good front light to compensate, that's going to look really weird. So spin it around, put some plants or something behind you if you're doing a small broadcast, but don't have a really intense light behind you. You could be using fluorescent overheads aren't that great, but maybe they're just some shop lights from Home Depot that you pick up. Or just how you orient yourself in the room. From a camera perspective, just about any camera that has HDMI or SDI on it is going to work fine. Even your DSLR camera may have HDMI on it. You may need an adapter, but that can sit on a tripod and be turned on. When you're talking about cameras, it could you could take a $500 camera and frame it properly and make it look great. And you could have a $20,000 broadcast camera that nobody knows how to establish a shot and looks horrible. So for instance, you'll see, you want your eyes like at the top third or quarter of the screen. We don't want a lot of extra headspace. We don't want to have a person way over to this side. Some of those framing things, if you go online and look up rule of thirds, that's important. I saw a stream last week and it was two people in the office. Great. And I was like, why are their heads in the middle of the frame? And then I have all this extra space. Well, there's a picture of Jesus on the wall. I said, okay, I get it. I'm sure someone said, we want to get that picture of Jesus because we're going to talk about that. I get it. Except So let's take the picture of Jesus off the wall, set it down on a table, and then frame our shot appropriately. And normally it wouldn't be a big deal, except we are so used to seeing TV done so well that when you're sitting watching it in your living room on your phone, you're like, that just seems weird or cheap or whatever. Maybe there's a little bit of anxiety over it, and we want to get rid of all those barriers. So that's why we frame things appropriately. For audio, some like Seth is using the audio on his computer and it sounds great, but you're probably going to want some type of a microphone. So you may have wireless microphones in your church already. Clip those on. Then you get into how do I get that in the computer? You know, do you have an interface? One thing I like is some of these little boxes that allow you to put a video in and an audio in and come out USB into a computer. And then you can go do software encoding. That's whatever transforms the signal into something that can go through the web. So somehow you have to get that in. Or you take you can take your microphone and plug it into the input of the camera, and now you've got those two put together, and that goes into your encoder.
Okay.
You said internet speed really quick. I recommend if you can get 5 megabits up. 5 meg up is what I say is a good buffer. We probably use about 2, but I like to say I would like to test our service and say, do we at least have 5? That gives me some room there. So sorry, what was your question?
Well, I'll go to the streaming speed real quick. I think speedtest.net is one way to try that. Is that what you use?
Yeah, either
find their test.
Yep. Either speedtest.net or fast.com. If you just type in fast.com, it'll give you your download. And after it does your download, I think you hit more info and it'll do an upload test. So, but streamtest.net is kind of like the de facto test. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great. So we'll drop those links in there, all that kind of thing. Yeah, as Phil mentioned, I'm seeing some comments. As Phil mentioned, rule of thirds, I was making slight adjustments to so.
And this is interesting. So like, let's say I'm a video director in front of my switcher and I'm looking at mine and Seth's. I'm going to tell my camera people to at least have our eyes be the same so that one person's not up here and the other one's down below. And when I go between them, it looks funky.
Right.
You know, so I want to get them to at least be the same. Yeah.
I'm even like a little thrown off by like the depth. Like I'm a little closer to the camera than Phil is right now. So I'm trying to like even it out. Otherwise you kind of have this kind of weird effect there. We'll stick on speed for a second. Somebody wrote in, how do you utilize that speed? I have 12 up at home. Last night OBS was only able to put out 1.5. Any thoughts on that? That's kind of bad. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, my one side of my brain says, well, the internet is being hugely taxed right now because every school and every church just got online. On the other hand, sports aren't streaming necessarily. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that is not using the internet right now that usually does use a ton of internet. So I think the internet itself has the capacity. Does your residential internet? I don't know. Like, depending on the service, you could test it on an off time and it could look great. But then on Sunday morning and all your neighbors get on, and now that's another problem. So I don't have a really good answer for that other than to call your ISP. That being said, if you're getting 1.5 up, that's still pretty good to do like a 720 HD stream. I know if I go to full HD, it's at 5, and HD plus is like 8. But even 1.5, you may just need to degrade your quality just a hair in OBS, but you should still be able to do a pretty decent stream. Yeah. I'd contact my ISP and say, what's going on and how can you give me a better quality of service?
That's great. That's really helpful. And so when he says ISP, just for anybody, that's internet service provider. So check with them, check where you're at. We even had a little advice come in, check your router. Some people, you might have a router you've had for 10 years that's been working fine, but when you get into this situation, it might be time to upgrade that router at home. A lot of internet service providers, like we have Spectrum here, they provide a router to you, usually the best one that they have available. So another thing to check with your internet service provider.
And make sure you're connecting. I would connect hardline, not Wi-Fi. Because Wi-Fi has all sorts of interferences. So if I'm going to do a stream, that computer should probably be connected with a cable.
Yeah, that's a good point. So if you see me going in and out right now, it's because I'm on Wi-Fi. Not great.
I'm on Wi-Fi
okay.
too right now.
Yeah. So you had some good points about lighting. The audio thing, I've seen a lot of people talking about issues with audio. They've mixed for their soundboard at church, and now they're wondering, how do I get that same quality, or how can I? Yeah, if you could talk about how you change.
Yeah, so when you're doing broadcasts, so you have meters on your soundboard, and they go from infinity, nothing, and then there's probably a 0 or a -6, and then where it turns to the red lights. When you're doing broadcast, you typically want to be at the top of your green lights and then dipping into yellow. Every once in a while, it's just hitting into yellow. That's a pretty good spot to be. Now, most churches, and a little bit of sound here, if their amplifiers are typically too loud, they may be running their service and it sounds fine week in, week out, and it's barely on the bottom of the green. That's going to be horrible for broadcast. That's not enough. So since you don't have an audience now, maybe you just turn off your house speakers, turn off the amplifiers, and start mixing, pushing everything up and mix with headphones on or some small speakers to hear what your audience would be hearing, and make sure you get that good broadcast level. So this last week in our church, I mean, we usually we kind of have the amplifiers set right so we can run good broadcast levels. But for instance, because we have a full band, we're used to hearing the acoustic drums or acoustic instruments. And I had to tell the sound guy, you're not mixing for the room at all. So we ended up shutting off all the speakers, and then he put on headphones and he could hear better. And then for this week, we put him in his own room with 2 little monitors, computer monitors, speakers. And now he's mixing just for broadcast and really paying attention to all the levels. So there's no reason to have the speakers on in the room. If anything, the pastor might be used to hearing that. So for instance, our pastor said, I feel like I'm shouting because I'm getting feedback from the room. So we took a little speaker and put it next to him just so he kind of felt a little bit better. But then we could push the audio up for what it needed to be for the stream. And then if you're doing, like for those of you who have digital consoles and stuff, maybe you're not used to using a lot of effects, but maybe you need to put more reverb on to make it feel like it's in the room. When you mix, this is especially for bands and things, if you're mixing for bands in the room is very forgiving. There's a lot of ways that the sound all mushes together. In broadcast, it's super dry. So for broadcast, you might put a room mic in there to pick up some of that ambience, or you're going to be using more delays and reverbs in your mix than you would normally be used to.
Right. Except if you have a praise team standing at social distancing.
Yeah, right. There's one church I know that actually had their band in different rooms to try and abide by all those rules, which makes it incredibly difficult.
Fair enough. Okay. Again, as you guys have questions, if you have any questions for Phil, just general or specific, feel free to drop those in comments below, and we're addressing those as we go here. Okay. You talked about audio. Before we dive into live and posting recordings and all that, you talked about audio levels. Can you talk a little bit about if you're creating a video that you will upload somewhere, talk about how you find the right decibel level for that. So this is people who are going to be editing in Premiere or Final Cut or something like that.
Still, so some things I do, like let's just say I edit in Premiere. One thing I do is I always right click on the audio track, and there's an auto gain, and then you want to set all your peaks to 0. And I always right click on that and do that, and it pumps up my audio to get it to kind of like a baseline. You're always going to want to be looking that as you play that back, is it dipping into the yellow? And I don't want to say whether that yellow is at 0 or above -6, because different meters mean different things. But typically you should be seeing the yellow hit a little bit, never red, never really all green. You want to kind of be just hitting the yellow a little bit. So that's how you'd mix the audio. I don't have a ton of recommendations, except for you've got to have some type of a broadcast level. Now, one thing we've noticed is that we're sending really good audio, but like we've been using livestream.com, and for 10 years, I've thought they squash audio. So people are cranking up to like 80 or 90 on their TV, and the band sounds loud and the speaker sounds loud, but they feel like they have to turn their TV up really loud. those are things I don't have time to really investigate kind of now. But live stream's been like that for years. So again, hitting in the yellow, that's the best I can say, the easiest.
Yeah. What's
example?
If say they're recording a message right now.
Right.
And that's it. That's the only thing they're going to post. It's going to be the pastor in his living room. And that's all they're going to be mixing. What's the best quick, dirty tool? At least do this thing to your audio if you have a chance.
Here's one thing I would do is, let's say you're sitting at home or wherever else. Unplug the refrigerator, turn off the air conditioner, watch for the dog who's barking in the background. Like I'll tell people, just take your phone or something and record quietly in the room and take it somewhere else and listen to it. And you'll notice all this ambient noise that you have in there that you never realized. Air conditioners, refrigerators, those are the big ones. Computer servers, your computer could have fans on it that are really loud, and all those are going to contribute to bad audio. As far as a microphone, if you have a small microphone or a lavalier, the nice thing right now is we're not worried about feedback at all, because if you turn off your main speakers in your sanctuary, you don't need to worry about feedback. So we can crank up those levels like we've never been able to in a live situation. The other option is, and I'm seeing them on Amazon and stuff, and I've never personally used them, but just the little Bluetooth microphones that connect into if you're using an iPhone, or even this would work if I was choosing this as my audio source. But now I'm getting something a little bit more directional than just trying to talk to my iPhone, maybe 6 feet away. Does that help?
Yeah, that's great. I think that's great. If somebody has a recommendation on a microphone that you've been using to plug into your phone, please drop that in the comments. If it's been working well for you, we'd love to share that information. Because I feel like that's a situation that we're going to be, a lot of churches are going to be in. How do we record in this intimate setting, but get really good audio?
Yep.
So yeah, that's helpful. There was a quick question. It looked like it got addressed already. If no house speaker is on, then how does the keyboard just hear,
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess I'm kind of coming from the world where I think about that. Like our band has in-ears, so they don't even know the house isn't on. I think you'd still have to, if you're in that situation, maybe you're still running your wedge monitors. And typically those are fed on an aux, so you can leave those a little bit lower and then still crank your mains. That's a good question. That's going to kind of be different for your situation. Or maybe they have to have one output of the keyboard that goes to the house and one output that goes to some little speaker that you set near the keyboard so they can at least hear themselves. You may have to get a little bit creative. And if you have a specific situation you want to ask about, shoot me a Facebook message or something. I'll try to address that situation specifically. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. And then, if you're doing something in a church where you had an organ, you've probably never had to mic your organ before, but you're going to have some type of a microphone to pick that up if maybe you're doing something with hymns. So it may just be some mics you typically use to speak into, set up kind of near the organ out in the house. And then, just so you can capture that audio. Yep.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, a camera that's way up in the balcony, and if your organ's up front, it's not going to sound the way that you want it to. So,
yep.
So you're saying just a regular microphone will be working for that situation.
Yeah, I mean your organ's probably pretty loud, so if you just put a microphone out, even if it's just like a Shure SM58 vocal mic or something, or one of your choir mics, you probably have choir mics, set a choir mic out somewhere in the room. And some of it sounded really good. You can hear the whole room. You're going to want to, though, be able to have a soundboard to mix that. So you turn the organ off when the pastor's speaking, get everything out except for the pastor's mic, and then bring it in when the hymn starts playing.
Okay. Great. All right. Hi, Aaron. That's great. We had a recommendation come in for, how do you say that? Road or
roadie. I've heard both. I've always said road, but
I know. I just don't want to come off as not knowing. And I have no idea. So I always say road because it sounds cool. So no big
road stuff is great. I mean, they have excellent mics for iPhones. I'm glad you brought that up because I see that stuff used in broadcast and in sports and everything. They're excellent product. Now, the toughest thing right now is getting product in. Like, I don't know if B&H is empty yet, but
right.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised. Like in the first week, I expected there'd be a big run, but I've had churches this week calling and saying, we need an encoder. I was thinking that was last week's problem. They're kind of gone right now. So what you may want to do is reach out to companies like mine in the area, because one thing that's happened is we have no business. So if we have an encoder, we're more than willing to rent or sell it or get you up and going right now. But there may be inventory with companies that aren't using it that would be happy to get it into your hands somehow. Until everything, unfortunately, all this stuff comes from China. So we're kind of stuck with waiting for things to come from China right now.
Right. Okay. So we talked about that. That's good. So my understanding, Phil, is that you've, Phil Grimpo with Inspirmedia Productions out of Lincoln, Nebraska, very helpful, has done a lot of installations for churches and helps them figure out their tech stuff. Over the past few weeks, and it looks like you froze up.
I hear you again.
Over the past few weeks, it sounds like you've been having some conversations with churches. What are some of the common issues that you've seen popping up?
Yeah. So I've seen some churches who have nothing. In particular, we've had a few churches that say, we were planning on doing streaming, and now we just got thrown into this. And that Cadillac streaming system, camera system we're going to want to do, we need to do it right now. And it's like, well, we kind of need to think through what you want for the long term. So I don't want you to, for instance, one congregation said, we had this, $300,000 renovation we were going to do, and the last third was $100,000 for video. Can we get that done this week?
Oh man.
No, I don't want to rush that. So what I'm saying is let's take right now to figure out, get some cameras in. Maybe they're not the best cameras. Get a switcher, get an affordable solution, and start feeling out how do we get volunteer camera operators? How do we frame shots? How do we get our slides and stuff into the computer? Like, there are some baseline things that are emergency things we need to figure out right now. For instance, and some of you may have saw it, I posted like a package, like Data Video is a company that has very affordable video stuff. And I've actually been really impressed with their quality. But like the day after this happened, they wrote in there, they said, here's a package, 2 cameras, a camera controller, a switcher, an encoder. It's like $5,500. And it's like, okay, so buy that, get going. And then later you can do your big upgrade. And some of these pieces we can reuse. Some of them maybe a smaller church could use. Some of them could go in a conference room, or youth ministry could use them. But I don't want you to all go spending your money right now. For instance, one church, we'd gotten them a switcher and they fell in love with the switcher. Like, this is the one we want to buy. And I said, that's really not your long-term switcher. It's a great switcher to get you through right now. Long-term, you're going to want something different. So I don't want people spending way too much money right now and getting in over their heads. Right now is about, churches that have never done lyrics on the screen are all of a sudden saying, we need to get lyrics on the screen. So we're talking about, okay, how do you format them? How do you make the text look good? How do you not have dangling words out there? How do you find camera operators and teach them right now and train them? So I don't want people going out and spending way too much money. Let's let this settle down. And another thing is that right now in April is typically when the biggest video show in the world happens in Vegas, and it got canceled. So right now is typically when video companies are unveiling their new product. Like, that should be happening in about 2 or 3 weeks. So the whole market's going to change up in a little bit here. So I'd say try to do the best with what you have, or buy some inexpensive gear right now. And then when we actually get some time to breathe and think about how we gear up for the next time, then we take the time to do it the right way. I don't know the best word for that.
The right way sounds like that's fine.
And there's a lot of things you can do right, but just in general, even outside of this crisis, we have a lot of churches that want to get into streaming. And I say, okay, so you just added 4 or 5 more volunteer positions to Sunday morning. Do you have the people to do this? Well, right. No, we can't even find a sound guy right now. Okay, this is a big thing to tackle. So usually it is a pretty long process anyway. So I just don't want people to rush it. and then not be able to do a good job. Do the best you can with what you have. One of my phrases is the whole, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. And I say, when life gives you lemons, make grape juice and let everyone wonder how you did it. So what is the way that we can use the equipment we have to get the best product out possible to communicate the best message that's ever been in the history of the world?
Yeah, that's great. I feel like most people have at least the phone to go on right now. And if nothing else, So I'm thankful for your point about volunteers, because it is a huge deal and it takes a lot of time to train people in some situations if they're not already versed on it. They may want to help, but it takes time. So you have to do it the right way, as Phil Grimpo says. It takes time. Let's see. Somebody talked about the components of it. We talked a little bit about live. Yes, good point on giving yourself some grace. The congregation is here with you right now, so just step back. Like, they're loving what you're doing, even if it's the first time. They're just thrilled that they're able to connect with you. So give yourself a ton of grace. Like, it is.
Hasn't it been interesting to see people who, like, we always had the people who complain in church about this, that, or the next thing. It's too loud. It's too quiet. I couldn't see. The temperature wasn't right. And all of a sudden now they're just like clamoring to hear from the church. Like, people are like, how am I going to get communion? Like, a month ago, we just kind of took all this for granted. So it's like this really interesting kind of spiritual awakening. And like, my family got in the living room together and sat down and watched TV and watched a Bible study. We wouldn't have done that before, but now we have this really captive audience. And you're right. They're being very forgiving. They're being very appreciative of what we're trying to do to get the message out as much as possible. Mm-hmm. So don't beat yourself up. It's time for us all to learn and grow at the same time.
For sure. And there's a whole nother conversation that needs to be had about, like, how can we connect outside of Sundays throughout the week on social media and all that. And so this is a really good opportunity for us to take some time and learn about that. But that's a whole nother conversation for sure. So Phil, talk a little bit about what churches are doing in terms of, we got to be on live stream versus what you've seen some churches going and just saying, you know what, we're recording it and we're uploading it and premiering it. So that's been something that's been interesting to me, is some of the bigger churches I know that stream every week are not bringing in production teams and streaming on Sunday mornings right now. They have a stream going out, but they've all pre-produced that, like, almost across the board. A lot of the ones who weren't streaming before are the ones who are really stressed out, saying, how do we put all this together? And at 9:00, we have to have a stream that works. And this is really stressful. Well, in with the social distancing thing is another issue. Like, maybe you bring your organist in, or your keyboard player and a vocalist, or your band or whatever, and you pre-record 15 hymns, 15 songs that you might use for the next 4 weeks. I think people are going to be fine if you do some of the same songs over and over again. I just thought about the whole Lenten/Easter thing. You may want to pre-record some Hallelujah songs, because we may be doing this for a while. But anyway, so record it earlier in the week, spend some time adjusting the audio, do post-production, have a opening hymn that you've put the graphics on later, so you don't need to do it in real time. Then go to the pastor doing his sermon, come back to another hymn or a song, and then either release that morning. Right now, I think people are being pretty forgiving and graceful with copyright permissions, or do the Facebook Live premiere. Mm-hmm. So now we're all going to watch it at the same time, but the stress is off of trying to do this live. Right. Or like we'll record like last week we did one service live and then immediately recorded for the next week. And then this week we're going to play that one back just off of a player while we record the next 2 weeks. So we're kind of doing this, this tower thing, but it gives you some time to make sure you fix fix a lot of those issues that are going to happen in live. And this, anytime we're dealing with technology, there's going to be problems. For instance, Seth and I, we talked earlier today. It's like, should we test this? Yeah, let's test. We'll test at 1:30. And at 1:30, things went well. And at like 1:50, my laptop just crashed. I had another laptop there, but if we had not tested that, it would have crashed 2 minutes into this.
Or for instance, last week we started recording our next service and some comms weren't working and I hit a wrong button on the switcher and I said, well, why am I going along? Stop. We'll just start over again. There's a lot more freedom, a lot more breathing room with pre-recording.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I really think that's what we should be looking at. I've also, so there is some discussion about, kind of step away from the tech side for a second, about it being a shared experience, like the importance of it being live and a shared experience that we're going through together versus being watched on demand. And I think that YouTube Premiere and Facebook Premieres provide an answer to that, because you can still kind of go live, but it still can be a shared experience in that way. And not only that, but you can have pastors in the chat box. You know, if you create that in your service or pre-service or something like that, you can still be going at the same time, whether or not the service is recorded or streamed. It still is at the same time happening. So YouTube Premiere, Facebook Premiere, they provide for that kind of thing. Does that run the risk of becoming outdated before it streams? Yes. Yes, it does. And that's where I think, and maybe Phil, you could speak to this, but for us, it's one thing to do music. It's another thing to do the message, because we're living in this day-to-day, hour-to-hour kind of world right now where, if you recorded a message ahead of time, it might be hard. Because even 2 days ago, it might be like, oh, you didn't even hear what happened, in the government, blah, blah, blah. So you could record music ahead of time, because that's kind of hasn't changed. We've had that hymnal for a while, which has been great. So I think that if you're sensitive to the music and then also sensitive to the message, I think you can start building in Adobe Premiere or iMovie or whatever you have access to a spot for your message. Then you could pre-record it all, drop in the message at a timely moment, and then schedule it all to go live. So what's it look like for you guys?
Yeah, so maybe you're recording the message on Thursday. Now at our particular church, we have not. One of the venues is doing some pre-recording. One is not. The sanctuary venue is recording their Lenten services earlier in the day and then replaying them. Mm-hmm. I'm going to lose my train of thought here, but I think, the things that I heard is announcements. Are they going to be relevant? Like if we release right now what we're doing in Holy Week, that could all change. So maybe we make them a little more generic, and we're telling people, make sure you're checking up on the church emails. That's where we're going to be communicating. The other one is prayers. I don't want to pray for healing for this person who died last week. That seems really insensitive. So maybe those prayers are a little more generic, and maybe we're pushing prayer requests out a different way. But you could easily record the music earlier and have that in the tank, and then just on Thursday or Friday be recording the message. And then it's as close to relevant as you can get. I mean, for crying out loud, Kenny Rogers was still alive when we started this. I mean, right?
So there is that. It's a really good point, Phil. Thank you. So one of the ideas, and feel free to use this, it came from Pastor Popovitz. He's in Texas now, and he was sharing that they may be doing pre-recording parts of their service, but to be sensitive and to be responsive in this time, they're actually having their readings, the Old Testament epistle, New Testament, they're doing those in the gospel read by people on their couch at home. They're sending the recording of the video into the church, and then they're building their service in a way where people from home are getting to be interactive in that way. And I just think that's a really cool idea. There's just so many opportunities to be creative in this moment, in this weird time that we're living in.
That's super cool. I've seen Scott Gunther. I don't know if he's on this. I know he's in this group. I don't know if he's on this right now, but he had found, I think he posted on here, a guy who has a whole bunch of lyric videos for hymns and stuff that he's saying it's really affordable, or maybe he's even giving it away for free. But here's all that stuff kind of in the tank. I know if some of you, I don't know if Dave Madden is on this group, but the folks at Concordia San Antonio know Dave, and he played at the Youth Gathering, and he's been doing his isolation congregation on Wednesdays and Sundays, and then pulling in from other musicians. Hey, they perform this song, I'm going to put that in for this one. Hey, here's some instrumentalists. So even if you have people who are musicians, they could be sending in music. Now, one thing that, I don't even know if we considered in the beginning is if you have all this music stuff that you plan on doing later, what happens when the organist gets sick? What happens when you can't meet? I mean, we have to remember the human element of we got to have all these people available. So I think the more stuff you can pre-record, irregardless of the technical issues, is what do we do? Do we have all these volunteers who can stand in, depending on their health in the next 4, 5, 6 weeks?
Yeah, that's great. Kind of back to your announcements thing. This might be a good time to, in your announcements, find a way to recruit people to, like if you're a fan of our page already and you're watching our live stream, that's great. Do you know people in our congregation who aren't? And so equipping people, like, make part of your announcements to build your community online. We've seen that we have a women's group that just kind of started up on Facebook for our church, and that's been kind of going and growing daily. I get to be an admin somehow on that. I don't know how to, but I think it's anyway. People are just recruiting people to that thing, and so the best practice advice for a lot of churches so recently has been, you have your page, but then you also have a group for your church. This could be a really good opportunity for you to build a group, and then everyone's equipped to say, like, I know Cheryl is part of our church, but she doesn't know about this group yet. So people are just recruiting each other. And this is a really opportune time to be building your digital community while you're not able to meet in person. And then when we do get back in person, you're going to have both running really well. So you're going to have the offline and the online, and you're going to have kind of the sync up of your community that's going to be seamless. And so if I went off on a tangent with announcements, but
I think that's perfect. I mean, this is where that whole concept of never let a crisis go to waste. Like, I mean, there's a lot of things that the church is saying. Like, we have people at our church who have never done a video before, and all of a sudden they're ramping up and like, let's get all these videos knocked out. So we got to think about how we're doing. Are you doing confirmation classes and midweek and Bible studies, and how are we doing all this? And maybe that's something that we keep doing afterward to have available for people who can't make it. My men's Bible study, I wasn't able to do it last night, but they're getting together online. Well, maybe even when we can meet live, we should still offer that, so guys who can't be there could still hop on and participate. So I think we're going to see a big shift. That we're kind of shuffling the deck for when we get out of this. Yeah. And that's what I'm thinking, like, how do we learn some lessons? Because I can pretty well guarantee we're going to be in this next spot. We're going to be in this exact same spot in the next few years. So we should probably use this to be a little more prepared for the next time around. For sure.
Yeah. So building your online community, building your email database, all these things are ways that we can stay in touch with each other throughout this hard time. I'm really excited because, as we shared that idea that came out of Texas about recording, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for creativity. I've seen a lot of things coming up already in the group throughout the past few weeks. And so as you go into the weekend here, feel free to get a little creative with it. It doesn't have to be the same as it always has been. This is our opportunity to try things, and there's so much grace, again, coming from your community. They are so excited to see that you have a YouTube channel now, that they are willing to be like, you know what, we had to start somewhere. And right. So use this, like kind of Phil said. Phil, anything you want to touch on? We've kind of been going for a while. I don't see a lot of questions coming in right now. Anything?
I think one thing is a lot of these forums. So like I'm on a few different ones. I'm kind of new to Lutheran Communicators, but people are asking a lot of questions. That's great. What I'd like to see is, what are your success stories? What are things that you've done that are working well that you want to share with people? So, as Seth and I talked beforehand, well, people ask a lot of questions. Did they resolve it? Did it work? Well, we don't really know. So share those ideas, those creative things, so other people can copy those as well. So we're not all trying to reinvent the wheel. And and I'm interested in the technical things, but from what you brought up with the creative, I'm really interested in, we've kind of opened our box here, whereas our box was that venue that we were in. We've opened the box a little bit, and it'd be interesting to see, like, wow, how could I do this object lesson better if I wasn't having to think of how I get a boat into the church? You know, like maybe we could go film this somewhere else. We couldn't do that before. I don't know why I'm talking about boats now, but
yeah,
I love to see how people are being creative that way.
Especially with boats. Good point.
Especially with boats. In Nebraska, we have a lot of boats.
There's so many boats. That I did not know.
3 boats.
If nothing else, we gain nothing else. This is great. So I've got another one. Carla wrote in here. Thanks for getting your picture on there, Carla. That's awesome. Facebook Live versus Premiere. How, when, group, or page? Let's figure it out. You're going to have to experiment with it and see where it works best for you. Phil and I talked about this just a little bit ago, Carla. So you might need to rewind after this is done. I'll bring it back up. How, when? The Premiere is totally different. You're not going live. You're not trying to get things all right. You can edit your videos ahead of time and get your audio levels right. You can work out some of the adjusting with your lighting if you need to bump up the lighting. The Premiere, you can schedule it to go live, kind of similar to setting up a live video. But it just becomes, Facebook gives it a little bit extra oomph right now because you're calling it, they're rolling out this Premiere feature. Group or page, I would say you want to roll out the Premiere through your page. If you have a group for your church, I would then take that and either you can do 2 things. You can share the link of the live stream or the Premiere video straight to your group. Sorry, I got to stay in my box here. Straight to your group. Or you could start, I believe you could start a watch party. And correct me if I'm wrong out there. I believe you could start a watch party in the group, which would be another option as well. So page then group is where I would go because the page is going to be public to the whole community. And then you can have some more intimate conversations inside the group with your actual membership. So any thoughts on that, Phil? Did I misspeak there?
No, I think that's definitely more your realm than mine. Okay. So I think you're right. Now, one thing that, well, if we're done with that, I just had one more thing I thought of. Someone mentioned to me the other day, if we're okay to move on to something.
Yeah, well, it all depends on where you're going, Phil. So I don't know. There are several churches I know that have multiple styles of worship. So maybe their 8 o'clock is a really traditional. Their 9:30 is blended, and their 11 o'clock is contemporary. So what they're doing is saying, well, instead of doing 3 different services every week, maybe we're finding a way to put these all together into one service that we broadcast, maybe all at those different times. But then it's kind of exposing our congregation to some other things. So I guess my point with that is don't think that because we have these multiple styles of worship at 8, 9:30, and 11, or whatever your times are, that we need to be producing an 8 o'clock service, a 9:30, and 11. Right. Maybe you bring them together into some new form, style of worship, and then you just rebroadcast them at 8, 9:30, and 11, just to kind of try and watch your resources a little bit. Yeah, that's a good point. And maybe we go sans music or something like that, because you still have the components of your liturgy that kind of like that are going to remain.
And I don't know if that was on this group or somebody, I think it may have been on Church Media Tech, but they were talking about like, what is the easiest way to get online? And he was thinking you could just have like a page that is a PDF and it has, hey, click this YouTube link and here's a song, and then watch this video and then read this scripture and read through this part of the liturgy. And then you can click on my video that has the sermon. So there's a whole lot of out of the box things you can do that aren't the stress of live. And maybe they're more devotional in nature, but there's a lot of resources out there that you could just directly link to without having to recreate them all on your own.
Yeah, that's really good. Phil, you asked for success stories. Somebody said, including text to give or QR codes during the live stream offering. There you go. I've seen several churches, and there are so many services out there that you can do for texting and adding texting into your communication environment. One reason you would want to do that for us. So our church live streams to YouTube and to Facebook. when a lot of people who watch our YouTube streams put it up on their television. So they're not going to engage directly in the chat because they're watching through a Roku or their smart TV. So that's where their device, having their phone, they'll have it right next to them while they're watching. So putting up a slide or a lower third that has a text option, especially if we're talking about offerings, and that's a different discussion altogether, is online giving. But putting an overlay that gets people to text a number with a keyword that gets them connected to a link, and you can automate most of that. So text to give is an option. Text in church is an option. We use TXT Signal, which has been good for us, but texting is a really good option, especially if you're talking about going live on YouTube, because people won't watch necessarily on their device, like their handheld device.
Now, this is a bit outside of maybe communicators, but congregations, and I'm guessing you're all aware of this, but giving has taken a huge hit. So I just recommend being very frank and candid with your people. Our pastor made an announcement this last week to say, hey, even though we're not meeting together, our expenses haven't gone down. They've actually gone up, because now all of a sudden we're streaming and we're getting this technology, and it's almost it's costing us more money now. It's going to be tough because people are also very fearful to give, but some people just aren't even thinking about it. Like for me personally, I have it auto drafted, but other people are thinking, yeah, whenever I go to church, I put the envelope. They haven't even thought about the fact that they haven't given the last few weeks. So I just be really candid with that, and have your pastor make an announcement, put the stuff on the screen. I think it doesn't even cross some people's minds. Yeah, it may not. And that's where being in person and kind of seeing an offering basket come across the front of your face changes things. So I have a couple specific questions in here. If a ministry hosts a live video for a conversation amongst staff, how best should one promote the upcoming live session to draw participants? Well, I mean, if you're doing it on Facebook, let's say, you could, one, send the link to your entire staff in an email and say, you need to head over to this future live conversation and invite a bunch of people. So one way to make use of your staff is to get them to engage on social. So definitely do that. You could even boost that particular post to anybody who already likes your page, which would be decent money spent and not a lot of money spent. For $10, you could probably ensure that you get in front of a few hundred people. Man, there are so many. If you have ideas on how to address this particular question, please put them in there. My mind is starting to kind of go at 57 minutes. But there are a lot of options to do that. But just getting online and inviting directly is always helpful, whether it's a live stream or whether it's an event. Oh, the one thing I was going to mention, this is where where email and social work really well together, because you most likely have an email database and you have some social media following. This is where you would send out an email and say, hey, we're going to go live over here. And so you are getting in front of a few hundred to potentially 1,000, depending on your email database, and you're sending people to social. And that doesn't cost you anything aside from it costs whatever it is to use MailChimp or Constant Contact. So don't be afraid to kind of pair up email and social media, because the email open rates for most churches are 30% to 45%, maybe even higher. So that is still a tremendously higher than the response rate that you're going to get on social media. So email is a stronger way to get a hold of people. So push them over to social and use it for this particular question. I think another thing on that is over communicate, but right now it may be nice to have some schedules of things of, every Wednesday, every Thursday, we're going to be giving an update. If you're doing live things, get a schedule, a routine for people. There's so much chaos right now. So the more that you can just kind of streamline some things will help people get into a little bit of a routine.
That's such a good point. Thank you for that, Phil. Because the last thing we want to be right now is like more noise. Like you're scrolling through your feed and all of a sudden it's like, oh, my church. I didn't see that one coming. I love the idea of adding scheduled times like Thursday afternoon at 2 p.m. We're going to be running a live thing. Or I've seen some friends, they're just hosting a prayer hour or something at noon every day. And so people know, okay, noon, that's happening. Or if they see it pop up randomly in their feed, they'll be like, oh yeah, that's right, noon is when that thing happens. So thank you for bringing up that point. That's so good. Phil, in your experience, how long viewer retention, do you look into this at all on your end? Do you have some folks looking into that?
It's interesting. I don't have the good data because I'm not the one controlling that part of it. But one thing I heard is they were so excited we had 4,000 people watching, and they look like, well, how long did they watch? 5-10 minutes.
Right.
Okay. And I don't know if they come back. I don't know if that was a hiccup. It's hard to tell if those were the stats from the hosting page or if that was from the streaming page. But I know we've had people who have said, I watched all 3 services. I watched from 8 a.m. until noon. I watched all of them one after the other. That's awesome. So I don't have a very good read on that, except for, make sure your stuff is archived. So one thing that we mentioned this last week is, hey, the internet's probably getting slammed this morning. Your neighborhood's getting slammed. Typically Sunday mornings, people aren't on their computers, but right now they are. So if it doesn't work, don't worry. It's going to be archived right afterward, and then watch it this afternoon. So maybe make it available, but then B, give people permission to watch it later when it's going to stream well, rather than being frustrated on Sunday morning and shutting it off because it's not working as well as they want it to.
That's great. That kind of speaks to Aaron's question here. Some strategies for churches in rural communities who don't have a lot of tech or without fast internet access. You kind of spoke to it a little bit earlier, Phil. Maybe you have some other points about reducing it. Don't go 1080. Push out a screen that's at 720. Don't be afraid to. I don't want to speak to go 480, but it's
shame on you.
I know. But like. Phil, in your work, maybe you've run across rural churches that are trying to do this thing. What do those conversations go like? I don't know.
I'll be honest. I didn't see a lot of it until just the last couple of days, where people have said, okay, this has been great. You're all streaming, but a lot of our congregations or a lot of our people are rural. Maybe they normally check the internet by going to the library. I don't know if this is the time. I mean, we used to get them DVDs. Maybe it's time to fire some of that stuff up again, since they're never showing up. Or do you have devices that you deploy? I haven't thought about this a whole lot. I'm glad. Thank you, Aaron, for bringing that up. Aaron is on my staff, so I thank you for the stumper. Maybe there's recording that's going on that people can come and pick up the DVD. Maybe it's something you put together that has a whole bunch of content that you've run in the past. Maybe you have some Bible studies that you've had on a video series that's sitting somewhere that you can put together just as a resource. I guess for this, I'd open it up to the Hive here to say, what are you guys doing?
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that I've seen, and now that I've had a chance to think of it, thank you for talking, Phil, was there are phone services. I'm not going to have the exact link. If you end up running your services through Zoom, they typically give you a call-in number. Of course, that takes some education too, because you have to call in the number, and then there's like a meeting code with that. There are some services. So I would do a Google search, and if somebody has something, yep, somebody said it, phone dial-in options for people without internet. Phone dial-in streaming is a thing. You could even record your service and put it on your voicemail. I don't know how that all works, but you could give people a way to call in and listen to the stream. So they don't have to have video access. Most people have a phone, and you could probably even do rotary at that point because you're just calling into a number. So phone streaming is a thing, and I was not terribly aware of it until recently. And then also, like if you're in a rural community, oh yeah, really good point here. If you're in a rural community, chances are like that you may need to call. I know even on our staff, we're kind of in a suburban setting. So we're kind of going through our database and saying, we need to make sure that we are calling X, Y, and Z and make a call and see what they want. For us, we're looking at what Phil said. Maybe on Mondays we need to be printing, or I don't know, burning DVDs, burning DVDs instead of just mailing them out, or making them available at the front desk for people to pick up from a safe distance. But yeah, so one person's saying they're doing DVDs. Yeah, so we are in a small town. Thank you, Kyla. Small town, and broadcast our services on the radio. Kyla, as you go through that experience, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. If there are some best tips that you want to put in the chat or a different post altogether, that is a great thing to be having a further discussion on. So thank you for that.
I like the person here who mentioned they're running about 40 minutes at most. So as far as viewer retention, it doesn't need to be a 1 hour service anymore. We don't need the offering piece. There's some pieces that we don't have to do. Maybe there's some songs that normally we would do because something else is going on in the service. Condense that, get it down to something that people can chew on without having to spend an hour of time. I've seen a lot of people condensing, getting it down to 30 to 45 minutes. Yeah,
that's good. Looking at our statistics on our stream, we stream for about 65 to 70 minutes per service. Average viewership is about 39 minutes. Take that for what it's
40, you'd be great.
So if we need to knock it down to 40, or then I don't know if it's going to scale down. I don't know what that looks like. Yeah, this is the fun one because drive-in church, FM audio, transmitters, all that fun stuff. Phil, how many drive-in church services are you doing right now?
Well, we've had a lot talking about it. And then some of the ones we were talking about, like, how do we set up a band outside? How do we set up an LED wall so everybody can see our graphics, because we've accustomed ourselves to be so graphics heavy. So I know of, probably a dozen that I've worked with that are looking at it and experimenting with it. How do we do FM transmitters? They're also looking at, like, how do we space out cars in our parking lot, and how much parking do we have if we have everybody coming? It has its own challenges. I know some of the ones that I'm working with right now are saying we're going to set up one screen or one LED wall, and then we're going to broadcast. We're going to be inside the church. All the people be inside the church as far as our pastor and such. And then we're going to do the FM stream and people can see into the church. Yeah, the toughest part with that is FM transmitters are very difficult to come by right now. Everybody's sold out. And then do you have, with the FCC regulations, like, how much power can you have? You don't need to start bringing lawsuits on yourself because you're stomping the radio station next door. So I think a lot are doing it. I heard that Texas has a lot of pop-up rooftop churches that, smaller congregations say, I only have 50 people in my church. They can all come in my parking lot and I can do a sermon here. So I think it's a really cool idea.
Yeah, for sure. If you look back if you do a search inside of our group here inside of Lutheran Communicators, I know Pastor Matthew Dent, D-E-N-T, shared recently about a FM transmitter that he has been testing out and is really liking. So he would give you a specific one that you could look at. So thank you for that, Pastor Dent. And then you're looking, Isla just popped in something here as we look into a local radio station. I'm bringing it up. It's coming up.
Well, that's great.
Agreed to come out to broadcast the service. Oh man, look at that. That's fantastic.
ESPN has no sports to do. Maybe ESPN should turn into a church broadcasting service. Wouldn't that be cool?
Easter services.
I like that. Yeah. Pivot, ESPN. It's time to pivot.
Hard pivot. That's good. That is good. So thank you for that. I'm going to be trying to reach out to some radio stations now. That's awesome. Okay. And then another person shared, we are also trying to provide something to chew on throughout the week. This is a good thing to do once. Okay, great. And then awesome. How can you encourage people to take something great? Awesome.
I love that. This like Seth was saying earlier, this is a time to get some good habits, and maybe we're creating content in a different way. And maybe those of us as communicators have gotten a little bit of a door. Like, I know congregations, their leadership is seeing results that maybe they thought they wouldn't have seen. So maybe now's the time we start creating that content to reach out to other people in different ways. And this has kind of been like a a way to test that out and show some success. That's great.
For sure. Love that. All right, guys. We've been going for a while and my brain's starting to, but Phil, I really appreciate you taking some time today.
Yeah.
This was really helpful for me. I got a lot of ideas out of it, especially from you, from the people in the chat. Thank you all for being here. Again, Phil Grimpo works with Inspirmedia Productions out of Lincoln, Nebraska. Phil has been helpful to so many different LCMS congregations and beyond that into the, all different sectors and all that kind of stuff. So if you need somebody to talk to, I'm going to put him out there and say he's the best. No. He is available. If you're looking at tech for your church or considering it in the future, he's a good person to talk to. He understands a lot of the logistical pieces that you're going to be wrestling with, and he's going to help you ask the right questions. So again, Inspirmedia out of Lincoln, Nebraska is such a huge resource. Phil, anything you want to share before we kind of sign off here?
I don't think so. I'm excited to see some of the more ideas that people have here, and everybody just keep having the conversation going. None of us are in this alone. Everybody's working together. Even talk to your other churches in town. There's other churches with other resources who are doing very creative things. We all kind of have a common goal here. So
yeah, for sure. Which kind of takes me off on a tangent. I've seen some churches who have video resources, and if you're one of those churches, kind of even reaching out to churches that may not and just saying, hey, if you want to come in and record a message, we can make some resources. This is a great time for partnerships, a great time for innovation. So much grace happening right now. Thank you all for being here. As you have questions, put them either in this chat or start a new conversation with Lutheran Communicators. Yeah, go ahead.
If some of you create some things, like let's say you're going to knock out 15 hymns or something, and it's something that can be used, consider making that available for the congregation that doesn't have the resources to put that together, or they don't have a good soundboard or a good way to record it. Try and spread that stuff around as much as possible.
Yeah, so helpful. The LCMS is putting out some photo resources right now. Look in the group, and Peter Slayton shared a great photo resource that you can make use for if you're creating graphics for social media and all that. So there's just so much going around there. Concordia Publishing House has been very helpful at this time, making some of their streaming licenses available. So reach out to them. People are ready to help. And so I'm just excited about this opportunity, frustrated by the isolation that it's caused to kind of get us to this point. But we have a good opportunity here. And so let's just all stay encouraging at this point. So thank you for being here. Thank you, Phil. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.